Okay, so I have my 24-inch loom warped. I'm using this Lions brand Comfy Cotton Blend yarn, which is a really hardy cotton yarn. I've not done a lot of weaving in general with cotton, and this is a really interesting animal to be working with because I don't know if you can see, but like, here, let me show you on this. Here, hang on. Here's a piece I had to cut off. It's a really loose ply. Like yeah, it's different, and it wants to kind of, you can almost see it kind of falling away from each other, the plies. So that's making it interesting. Anyway, this is just, I have absolutely zero expectations for this as a finished object. It was mainly just going to be a trial run before I tried weaving a table topper with my hand spun. I wanted to practice on this to see if I could do what I was envisioning, mainly getting the length I wanted. This is a really short warp. I only warped it about maybe 45 inches. I only need the finished thing to be 24 inches, including fringe, pretty much. Well, maybe not including fringe. It could be a little longer, including fringe. But anyway, so I didn't need a long warp. I usually factor in 18 inches of warp, of waist for my warp. So, 45 is more than enough. And the only reason I didn't make it exactly 18 inches more is because I warp from my table to this countertop and I couldn't get my table close enough. It just wasn't feasible to get it so that I had the loom over there and the warping peg here, and to get this table all the way over here close enough, it just didn't work out. So 45 inches was as close as I could get it. Anyway, I was fine with how it warped up. And again, this is just such a heavy cotton yarn. And cotton, I mean, this looks very open. You can see how open this looks. Cotton has no fluff to it, and it has no bounce to it either. I mean, this is very taut because of how tightly I have it wound on the rollers and everything, but it just looks very open. And I know once I have it off the loom, it'll close up some. And being cotton, I think once I soak it, the finished piece, it'll also, hopefully not be this open. Anyway, the one thing I did want to figure out with this piece was how to calculate how long my fabric is getting as I go. I've never had a really good way of doing that, because as I'm weaving, like once I get up so far, I roll it onto this front beam. So I can't know how much I already have on there unless I would unroll it and measure it, or measure it as I go. And I've never thought to do that. And I just know myself well enough to know that I probably would forget at some point to measure, and then I would be wrong. So what I did was I came up with this little system here. I've got this very, very thin piece of cotton here, and you can see a knot right there on that end. That marks my 24-inch point. And the other end of it, I just popped right in here in the very beginning, well, a row in, and you can see there's a little knot there. So that was my beginning point. And so my plan is to just, before I roll it onto the front beam, each time I'm just going to like loop this into this outside strand, and just carry it up the edge of my fabric. And that way, once I get to that last knot, I will know that I've got my 24 inches and that I'm done. I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if there's another way weavers tend to do this. I have never found a way to do that. I'm sure there are fancy looms that maybe keep track of that for you in some way. I don't know. But this seemed like a reasonable way to get a pretty close estimate of the length of my fabric. The other thing I noticed, or I'm learning on this piece, is I started I left my big long tail for doing my hem stitch on the beginning on the right. Usually I leave it on the left, and then I have to hem stitch this way. I'm finding it way easier to do going from right to left on the front. I do it from right to left on that end, and it's fine, like on my finished end, but I don't know why I always thought it would be easier left to right on this end, but I'm actually finding it way easier to do right, left. That absolutely probably means nothing to you if you're not a weaver. It's just the way you come in. So let's see, I'm doing over 3. See, that last stitch is already here. I don't know if I can do this one-handed. That last stitch is already, this group of 3, they're locked. So I'm going to go over 3, down 2, and bring my needle up. And of course, it's getting caught on everything. Okay, so now, see, if I was doing this with both hands the way I usually do, my thread would be over here. So now whenever I do that again, and I go back down that same hole, but only over 3 instead of down, this is bringing this up in the loop of the yarn. So it's automatically going to lock it. When I work from the other end, I have to like make it go through that loop. So it's just happening more naturally. It's a little thing, but you know, it's making this a little bit easier. So anyway, this is where it is. I've only been at the weaving for a very short period of time, and I've already got like a couple of inches. So this is going to go pretty darn quick. I don't know if I'll get it done today, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, so there you can see what I was talking about. I just brought it up from underneath and it's hanging over there. And this isn't something that'll be left in, obviously. Once I'm all done, this will be super easy to just pull out. So it's just a guide for length. Okay, so it's the next day, and I have just come to the end of my warp. As you can see, I can't roll that back roller out any further, so I've reached the end, and here's the end of my marker that I was using. You can see there's my little knot indicating my 24-inch mark. So I would say I did a pretty good job of estimating this warp based on the length that I wanted it to be. Most of my waist will be at the front beam. And also, interestingly enough, and completely accidental, is it looks like I have just enough yarn left on my shuttle here that I can do my hem stitch across the top. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll cut it off the loom and we'll see how the finished dimensions end up. So here we are off of the loom, and length. So here's my marker strand, you can see. I did end up at 22 inches. My marker strand is showing from the first knot to this final knot 23.5 inches. And I did figure I probably would lose a little bit of length just because of it being wound in there. I think what my knots may not have been actually super accurate, but you can only get so accurate putting little knots in tiny, tiny thread or yarn, I guess, cotton yarn. Anyway, so that gives me a good indication of, number one, this was stretched on the loom. You know, when you have it wound on, it's stretching the fabric. Once you take it off, it rebounds. So that gives me a good idea of how much rebound there was. There was at least an inch of rebound, if not, that whole 1.5 inches, because as I showed you before, it did come up to this knot where I stopped. So that's interesting and good to know. The fact that I wanted this to be 22 or 24 inches and it's only 22 isn't a big deal because I have fringe and I can just, I'll put an inch of fringe on either end and I'll still have my 24 inches that I was going for it to be on the table that I wanted on. Let's see what else. Oh, here, let's see. I'm just curious because, like I've said, I usually allow for 18 inches of waist on my weaving projects. And honestly, I don't know that I've ever actually measured that. I think that was a number that that's my notes about my project, actually. I've never measured it. Those numbers were based on something that I read or heard in a weaving resource. So on this end I have 8 inches, and this is the end that was on the back of the loom. So that's 8 inches. Let's see how much I have here in the front. I feel like I always leave more on the front when I tie it onto the front beam than I really need to. Let's see. This is hard to do with one hand. So that's approximately at 0 there. So this is 16 inches. So 16 and 8 is 24. So that's 24 inches of waist. Which also actually makes sense because, like I told you, my warp was a bit longer than I really needed it to be. So that's okay. But really, I don't know. I'm always tentative about having less at the front because I need it to tie on snugly, and I have a hard time getting it to tie on snugly when I don't have a lot to manage with my hands, if that makes sense. It may not. Anyway, so yeah, obviously I have a lot to cut off on this end, and this will pretty much just be waste because I'm not sure what I would do with, 17-inch long strands of yarn other than use it for fill or something. But overall, the project itself, I'm kind of happy with. It's nice and let's measure my width. Sorry. Again, it's a little difficult to do one-handed. Okay, so I have it laid out and my width is 21.5 inches. I am totally forgetting, let's see, did I write it down? Oh, my warp was 22.75, so 22 3/4, so 21. So I lost 3/4 of an inch in width, which that's not bad. So I know in the past when I've used the full width of that 24-inch loom, which the loom itself, physically the loom itself is 24 inches. The heddle is not 24 inches. It is 23-ish inches. So I usually end up with like a 22-inch width on a fabric if I've used the entire heddle, which this time, like I said, I had a little weirdness go on over there on the left-hand side, so I was short a bit. But I don't know. Overall, I'm kind of happy with this. I'm going to trim this fringe off. I mean, this obviously still needs to be soaked and it'll kind of even out and not be so wibbly wobbly, but I am going to trim off the fringe first and set it on that table that I was ultimately making this for, or ultimately will be making the other one for out of wool, and see how that looks. And just a side note, in case I haven't said this before or you haven't heard it before, this is how I cut my fringe to keep it even. I use my cutting mat and rotary cutter. It does a pretty good job, although it was really funny when I just did the first side. This is a cotton polyester blend yarn. I think I said it was cotton earlier, but it's 50-50 cotton polyester. The polyester threads really embedded themselves into this mat, and I had to like really rub to get them out. That was kind of weird. I've never experienced that before. Okay. I couldn't hold the phone while I was cutting, so. But yeah, it's done. But you can see, like, look at those threads like embedded into the mat. Kind of have to rub to get them off, and then you end up with a little pile of polyester fluff. And there you can see I've got 62 grams worth of waste, which seems like so much. Okay, I had to do some calculating. So this yarn's about, it's 392 yards per 200 grams. So that is about 1.96 yards, I think I calculated, per gram. So 62 grams of waste, that's like 121 yards. That's hard to believe that that's what this is here. And that does seem like that's enough to make something, a hat. I wouldn't make a hat out of this, but you know what I mean. It's like definitely a lot of waste. But again, I'm not sure how you get rid of having a lot of waste with weaving projects when you need that length, both front and back, on your warp for the stability of the warp. I mean, it's just sort of built in. So anyway, just more pondering than anything of substance there that I'm saying. Let's take this in and see what it looks like on the table. Honestly, this is not bad. I'm pretty happy with how this fits on here. Yeah, it's a little wibbly wobbly again because it hasn't been soaked and the edges are a little, I don't know, what's the word? Not distended. I don't know. Anyway, the edges are wonky at the moment. I think that'll work out once it's soaked and if I give it a light steaming or ironing or something. I don't know. But honestly, just overall for the project, for the trial run of what I want to make for this table, I don't think this is too bad. I am quite pleased. Please excuse the shadow. I have the ceiling light on here. But yeah, I'm happy. So I feel a little bit better about moving forward with weaving with some quote unquote good yarn to do this. This is the good yarn in question, some hand spun. Now the only thing about this is definitely lighter. This is not the same heaviness as this cotton. So I would have to do some figuring there as well to see if I think I have enough. I need to calculate my final yardage for this as well. Okay, so according to my calculations, I had used approximately 255 yards of this blue for the warp. That does include the waist, which you need to calculate in because you're going to have waist. And then I just weighed this ball, which was my weft. Obviously, did not use very much, only 40 grams. Now, I will admit I did not weigh either of these before I started, so these numbers may not be 100% accurate, but they're going to be close. So yeah, 40 grams is approximately 79 yards. So that's what, 330-ish yards total. Again, of a much heavier weight yarn than that hand spun that I showed you a minute ago. So, yeah, I don't know. I probably could still do it. I'm still not 100% sure that I want to use that hand spun for this. I mean, I do, but I'm not sure it's the best pick for that room. And honestly, I may just put this on the table for a while until I decide. But either way, I feel like this trial run was a success. I got information that will be useful to me, and I'm happy with the result, such as it is.